With the upcoming re-release of Icecrown Citadel, the world of Wrath of the Lich King Classic is about to see a resurgence in popularity as players race to conquer the Frozen Throne. Iconic bosses, lore, and weapons are eagerly anticipated, and while many players are busy preparing for the next raid, I've been investigating a different region on the frozen land of Northrend, or rather, under it. Throughout this expansion, we discover the Nerubians, a race of spider-like beings who have been almost totally destroyed by the undead scourge. The once mighty underground halls and caverns have fallen to ruin, and all but a handful of Nerubians have succumbed to the undead plague, the dead now serving the Lich King as subterranean shock troopers and laborers. In-game, there are some pretty obvious locations that have ties to both the living and scourged Nerubians, as well as some less obvious ones, and today I'm going to be compiling all of these clues to showcase truly how far this underworld could stretch underneath Northrend. As always, thank you for your fun comments and support, and with all that being said, let's get right into it. Far below the howling wind and snowy hills of Northrend lies Azjol-Nerub, the Nerubian Empire. This civilization was first featured in Warcraft 3, where Arthas and his Scourge ally Anub'arak navigated through the tunnels on their way to the Frozen Throne. The network is divided into two main levels, the Upper Kingdom and the Old Kingdom. In Wrath of the Lich King, the Upper Kingdom, which features frosted tunnels and scattered overlooks, is known simply as Azjol-Nerub in the game. It is here where adventurers face off against Anub'arak, the traitor king himself, on their way to cleansing the kingdom of Scourge corruption. This 5-player dungeon features some of the greatest verticality in the entire game, and it seems from the dimensions that the instance begins very close to the surface and may descend all the way down to the bottom of the Upper Kingdom. From the shadowy tunnels and grottos leading off into the darkness, we can assume this layer extends further away from the entrance, but the actual boundaries we'll come back to discuss in a minute. Below this point, we can begin to discuss Ahn'kahet, the Old Kingdom. This was once the imperial capital, featuring grandiose temples and spidery architecture that contrast well with the ancient fungal forests and stalactites. Peering over the sides of the walkways, we can see what can only be described as the bottom of the world fading away into the dark, with rivers of fire and water converging across this primordial plain. It seems the Nerubians chose this massive cavern to first build in, and the whole dungeon really reflects the keystone role the Old Kingdom plays within Azjol-Nerub as a whole. Old God corruption can be seen throughout this level in the form of the Forgotten Ones and their Twilight's Hammer servants, giving us another clue as to the great depth we find ourselves at when exploring this area. This is deep in the earth, well within the reach of the insidious old god Yogg-Saron. Even though the instance portals for both dungeons can be found very close to one another at the Pit of Narjun in southern Dragonblight, I think this is mostly for gameplay reasons, and it's obvious to me that Ahn'kahet is located practically underneath the Upper Kingdom, or at least parts of it. We know this Pit of Narjun is but one of many entrances, and the side tunnels indicate it could be something of a conduit between different locations and levels of the Empire. There are two more official locations in the game where we can actually explore parts of Azjol-Nerub. The first is in southern Icecrown, right under the Frozen Throne. During your questing in this zone, you might accidentally stumble into a massive chasm below the Citadel, leading you to Nazanak, the Forgotten Depths. This frigid cave has features of both the Upper and Old Kingdoms, as players can travel past the frozen, glacier-like walls, the icy lichen, and a variety of fungi. However, I'm tempted to call this part of the Upper Kingdom, especially considering the story of the Lich King. Arthas and Anub'arak first arrived at the Icecrown Glacier using tunnels in the Upper Kingdom, and it makes sense that these caverns could have once served the same purpose. The quest line below the Citadel also gives us further detail. The Lich King casts his frozen heart into these depths, never to be found again. And once Icecrown Citadel had concealed the chasm entirely, I think it's fitting to refer to them as the Forgotten Depths. Even farther north, at the Crusaders Colosseum, champions get a surprise one-way ticket to the Icy Depths when the floor of the stadium collapses, sending players into a subterranean lake near some Nerubian ruins. This results in a rematch against a newly resurrected Anub'arak. But after the fighting is done, you can really appreciate the environment that's been under your feet this whole time. My favorite detail here has to be the icy walls. It's almost like the glacier has seeped into the northern reaches of the Empire, completely drowning them. While most of the civilization has been overrun by the Scourge or the Forgotten Ones, it seems the rest has fallen to the unforgiving ice. So at this point, we now have 4 official locations that we know are a part of this underworld, created by the Nerubians. However, there are multiple other locations we can add to our map to show just how far this empire goes. If you started your Northrend journey in the Borean tundra, you might be all too familiar with the Scourge Nerubians attacking the Alliance and Horde bases there. In the Mightstone Quarry, workers have cracked into a Nerubian tunnel and now work to repel the invaders, while on the blackened Sands of Nassam, a similar sight can be seen at the Alliance front lines. It is possible that the temple city of Enkila, a major Scourge stronghold in the zone, was also part of the Nerubian Empire, but the lore seems to indicate it was built by the undead after the Nerubians were assimilated. Another maybe can be found in southern Icecrown, where the Argent Crusade has blasted a breach through the mountains on their way to the Citadel. A number of enemies with the Forgotten Depths prefix can be fought just outside this ravine, hinting that perhaps the Scourge has tunnels nearby to provide reinforcements. Using the information we have so far, we can begin to put together an estimate of the extent of Azjol-Nerub beneath the continent. It seems logical that, to provide some sort of regularity to the shape here, the central bastion of the city actually rests beneath Wintergrasp, which I find pretty interesting. One issue you might take with this map is that the Nerubians could have dug out some of the tunnels after joining the Scourge, making the Empire, in its prime, much smaller than this, at least in the south. This is valid, however, given the southern tundra is pretty far away from the main locations, for the sake of urgency, there were probably already some tunnels in the area that the Scourge could make use of. There is one more piece of information I want you all to consider, and it once again takes us back to the journey of Prince Arthas Menethil. According to legend, the living Nerubians once were able to control the giant Jormungandr worms that now roam Northrend, their powerful fangs able to crush rock and bore tunnels into the frosted earth. These worms helped create many of the tunnels and caverns of Azjol-Nerub, but this knowledge has been lost to time, and now the Scourge must utilize slower methods of underground assault, or otherwise rely on existing tunnels like I mentioned earlier. One thing that always bugged me about the Nerubian areas in WoW is how there were so many retcons in the geography compared to Warcraft 3. In the campaign, after landing, setting up a base, and claiming Frostmourne, Arthas entered Azjol-Nerub in the north of Dragonblight into an area known as the Shadow Web Caverns. While this entrance was, technically, moved to the Pit of Narjun, I do have a possible theory. In the north of Dragonblight, players can explore the Ice Heart tunnels that are filled with, what else, Jormungandr worms. While any potential tunnel entrance has now been lost to time, or the seismic effects of the warring ice giants, this location fits pretty well on the prince's journey as shown on the in-game map. Could it be that this was once the entry point into the elusive Shadow Web Caverns? We can't say for certain, but I think it's a cool idea. and it makes a lot of sense with the locations present in the game. Despite Azjol-Nerub not having its own zone within Wrath of the Lich King, I think putting together these separate areas helps make the world feel all the more connected and alive. With these ideas about the geography underneath Northrend, it's possible that Arthas explored totally different areas of the Nerubian Empire than we ever got to see in-game, which I think is pretty mysterious and exciting. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, may the Force be with you.